So we only have 30 minutes, so we have a lot to talk about. So what I want to do before we begin is just talk about how beautiful this book is. The design and the book art of the jacket. And if you have the book, I don't know if you opened it up and saw the map. And there's also some beautiful embellishment. So as a full-fledged bookworm, these things are very important to me with my books.
Me too, yeah.
And how did you settle on?
Well, I really wanted an Austin-based artist to do the illustrations for the book, and the one that my publisher liked best was also my favorite, Mishka Westel, and she didn't do the cover, but she did all the internal illustrations, and she did the map of Austin. I always love it reading fantasy novels when I was a kid, when there was a map to refer to. You're always flipping back and forth to the map. So we wanted to do something cool with the inside of the cover, and I thought a map of Austin with all the locations that are mentioned in the story would be a fun thing. And whenever I went on my book tour earlier this year, every time I would open up the cover in front of librarians, they were like, "Woo!" So just like you guys, made me very happy.
Yes. So we're going to talk about bats today. We're going to talk about music in Austin, and we're also going to talk about opal. So I thought we should start with bats. And if it is not obvious, I am a big fan of bats.
You guys give it up for JJ's costume. I
Yes.
feel like I got the best moderator. No other moderators dressed up, so.
Bats are very important to our ecosystem. There's about 20% of all mammals on Earth are bats. That is a lot, bat species, that is. They're very important. They eat our mosquitoes, which if you've read Bridge to Bat City, you will know the importance of them eating all those pesky bugs, not the good bugs, the pesky bugs. So I know why I love bats. And I love sharing about bats. But why did you choose to write a book about bats?
It was not anything I ever anticipated. But when I moved to Austin in 1996, kind of drawn by the allure of this town that welcomed weirdos, you know, I had always self-identified as a weirdo, and this town is like, keep Austin weird, and a whole culture of acceptance and weirdness kind of drew me to Austin. And when I first moved there, and people found out that I was new in town, one of the questions I kept getting asked is, have you gone to see the bats yet? And I had never heard about this, but I quickly discovered that Austin's home to the world's largest urban bat colony. There are actually more people living in, more bats living in Austin than people. And when I first moved there and went down to see them, everybody gathers on the bridge. Every night there's people gathered on the bridge from like March to around October. At sunset is when the bats fly out to feed, and they all kind of drop out from under the bridge and fly out in this steady long stream. And it was a really powerful experience and really had a big effect on me. It was crazy to see this whole other ecosystem hidden inside the human ecosystem. And it was the one place I'd ever seen where there was, it's called an ecotone. It's where, you know, a human habitat overlaps with an animal habitat, and they just fit perfectly together. And it was one of the, and then I got so fascinated, I found out the story of when the bats first came to Austin, and that was when I really fell in love with them. In 1982, they refurbished the Congress Avenue Bridge in downtown Austin, and added these long, narrow concrete gaps so the concrete could expand and retract in the cold and the heat. And yeah, you can see them in this photo. I don't know if you guys...
Yeah, I think they're on the monitor.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There we go.
So you can see those long, narrow cracks in the bridge, and turns out they're about 1.5 inches, and that's just the perfect size for Mexican free-tail bats to fit in. They need a narrow gap exactly that size so they can back into it and nurse their young and be outside the reach of predators. So they inadvertently created the perfect bat hotel in the middle of Austin when they refurbished this bridge. And overnight, like, the bats discovered it, and 1 million bats moved in. And that was a very scary week for the people of Austin, because they would...
There we go.
What I also love is the local newspaper, the Austin American-Statesman, right there next to the bridge. So these reporters would come out and be confronted with these bats every day. And there was a lot of negative stories in the press. about bats. And this story got picked up on the AP Wire and was all across the country. Bat colonies sink teeth into, vampire bats invade Austin. And it was like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. People were really frightened because, for several reasons, but I think one of the main ones is from the time you're young, you're preconditioned to be afraid of bats. I mean, there might be some internal, like human instinctual fear of bats, but also it's fostered by the media. Everything from Scooby-Doo to, old Vincent Price horror movies, everything, an easy scare is to have somebody open up a door and bats come flying out. So people were already preconditioned to fear the bats. And people started to worry about disease. There's actually much more rabies in dogs than in bats, but people assume that it's worse in bats. It's part of the negative stigma of bats. So, and that's what I love about this story. They were considered an invasive species, and the city council was there was talk of getting flamethrowers and blowtorches to burn them out of the gaps because people were so afraid of them. And then they were going to put nets up so the bats couldn't get back in. But what happened was people discovered there was a bat conservationist named Merlin Tuttle who saw the stories about Austin and decided to come down. Like this is a teaching opportunity. So he came down to Austin and started to tell people about the bats and that they eat their own body weight in insects every night. And for Austin, which is the live music capital of the world, it has all these outdoor music venues, like a giant colony of bug-eating, mosquito-eating bats right in the middle of downtown was perfect. It was wonderful, and it actually made it a much more pleasant city to live in. And there was no, so in the space of just about a year, they went from this invasive species that they were going to eradicate to becoming the town mascots and its largest tourist attraction. And I grew up loving stories like James the Giant Peach and Roald Dahl and stories about anthropomorphic animals. And this true story, I'd never heard of this. I've never heard of a species invading a human city and people are terrified of it and want to get rid of it. And somehow it wins the city over and then becomes our local mascots. We had an ice hockey team named the Austin Ice Bats. Bat City is one of Austin's nicknames. We have 3 statues downtown: Willie Nelson, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and a big statue of a bat. So it's become one of our pillars. So I love that story because it's a story about having preconceived notions and preconceived prejudices about someone. And it kind of deals with issues of immigration and acceptance. So I always loved this story, but it was outside my wheelhouse. I usually write big science fiction novels, set in the future, and this seemed like outside of my wheelhouse. But I have 2 kids, a 16-year-old and a 6-year-old, and both of them had their own kind of love affair with the bats. And I took them down to the bridge, and they asked me a million questions, a lot of which questions people don't know the answer to, like where do the bats live? And so all of that, revisiting it again with my 6-year-old, made me this is a wonderful story. And even though I'm a science fiction writer, I'm going to go ahead and tell it anyhow. It might be this weird blip in my bibliography, but I love it. And I had so much fun writing the story, and it was a way for me to celebrate Austin and celebrate all the musicians and the whole culture that I love there.
Thank you for writing about bats. And you've mentioned music, so we're going to move on to music.
Yes.
How many people, just to raise a hand, how many people read the book already?
Wow.
All right.
I love you.
Well, you're in
Thank
for a
you.
treat. So music does play a star in this book, Austin music. You also introduce us to the word melomaniac or
Melomania.
mania. I thought that he made this word up, so I had to Google it. It is a real word. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about how music plays the role, or what
Sure.
melomania?
Melomania is dogs are melomaniacs. Anyone who's can be fixated or kind of become under a trance by music or musical tones is a melomaniac. It's it seems like a combination of melody and maniac. And I am a maniac for melodies, and I always love that word. And my protagonist, this young 13-year-old girl named Opal, is a melomaniac who loves music, and and grows up watching Austin City Limits. Any of you guys ever watch Austin City Limits? Is a huge thing. Yeah, I love that show, and it's huge for her. And so a lot of people, I think, their connection with Austin is through Austin City Limits. So yeah, I wanted to celebrate. When I moved to Austin, I felt like and I was driving around town. It was just incredible. Like I felt like I had wandered into like a 24-hour musical that was just playing out every day, because all the greatest musicians in the world would come to this little town in Texas to perform, and because of South by Southwest and other things, like the whole world kind of comes to Austin, and it's a really, really unique city, and it's known as the live music capital of the world, which is kind of a Chamber of Commerce thing, but it's actually true. There's wherever you go, there's outdoor music venues and people playing all kinds of music, and all the greatest musicians from the world, all over the world, come to Austin to perform. So it's a great place to be a fan of music, and Austin is unique also in the South, and Austin is the one city that kind of fights back against what I say. Austin is the one city in this whole stone-hearted state where weirdos are welcome. And that's true about Austin. Maybe not so much. And so I love its uniqueness and the way they call it the blueberry and the tomato soup. I call it an island of sanity and a sea of madness. But so I love Austin. I wanted to celebrate it and its culture and all the melomaniacs there.
Yeah. So we're not going to give you any spoilers on the book, but the bats do love music. So that is why I brought it up. And I also did some research to see if bats truly loved music, because I'm a science person, and I was like, oh, maybe bats like music. What I discovered was that male bats sing love songs. And so scientists have been researching this phenomenon. So they
are fascinating.
They are very fascinating.
They actually have a nursery under the bridge where the bats will drop off their babies and some bats will stay behind and watch over the young. So there's like a little nursery inside the bridge while the other bats go out to hunt. Really fascinating. And I've become friends with a lot of bat conservationists, and so they know a lot more about bats. I'm becoming a minor expert on bats.
So sort of related still on the music theme, because there's a lot of musicians that are featured in the book. Did you talk to any of them? Because some of them become quite heroes in the book.
Yeah, I did read, once the book was published, I sent a copy to Willie Nelson. Because Willie Nelson is like the unofficial mayor of Austin, and there's a statue of him downtown, and he, but also Stevie Ray Vaughan is really revered in Austin, and Joe Ely, I sent him a copy of the book, but I wanted to, the book takes place in the 80s, because that's when the bats, I also have an obsession with the 80s, but the bats moved into the bridge around 1982, and so it kind of I take things, and by 1992, is when Austin had declared itself the bat capital of the world. So it was kind of a decade of events that I amalgamated and combined down into just one summer. So all the stuff that happens in the story really happens. It just doesn't, all happen as conveniently as in my tale.
And there's lots of factoids in the book about the musicians in Austin, but also of Austin in general, and also of bats. Lots of factoids. And I will share you a factoid of bats in DC. So the animal, the official animal of DC is the big brown bat. We have 7 to 8 species here in DC. They're mainly solitary, or they live in very, very small groups, not the massive quantities that Austin has, the millions of them. Let's change directions to Opal, who is our star of this book, along with the bats and the music in Austin. So Opal, if you haven't read the book yet, Opal's a very determined, compassionate girl who speaks for the voiceless, so who speaks for the bats to help them find a home. I was curious what inspired you, one, to make the lead character a girl, but also what inspired you with Opal?
Opal's name is, I had an aunt, Opal, and I always loved that name, so I always wanted to use it in a story. And I think I made it because I have two girls, and I was kind of living vicariously through them and their experience of falling in love with the bats. And I spent a lot of time playing with them, so I kind of wrote the story for them originally, and wasn't sure if I would share it with the world. So I think that was why I made it a little girl for my own kids.
Yeah.
But Opal is really, kind of my avatar. When I was 12 or 13, I felt like a misfit and a weirdo, and I had the same name as a character on Sesame Street. So every kid I met would ask me where Bert was, and I had these giant Coke bottle glasses and wore secondhand clothes. Just felt like a weirdo and a misfit, and like I didn't belong anywhere. I know a lot of kids feel like that, and I always loved stories where the protagonist was that way, and because you could relate with them, or I could relate with them more. So I was really, James and the Giant Peach was huge for me. I remember there was this big orange copy of it in my elementary school library, and I wanted to own it, but I didn't have a copy, so I would just check it out. You used to have those books in the back of the card catalog. You just see my name over and over again, renting out James and the Giant Peach. So I think I always wanted to write a story like that, and this is me fulfilling that wish.
Okay, so we're going to do I'm going to have one final question, and then I am yielding the stage to you guys to ask questions. So my final question is relating to bats again. So what can we do to learn about bats, but also how we can maybe protect them in our neighborhoods?
That's a great question. My friend Merlin Tuttle runs an organization in Texas, Merlin Tuttle's Bat Conservation, but he goes all around the world protecting bats. And after the COVID pandemic, bats really got a bad name, and even more negative press and bad feelings heaped on bats. So I have teamed up with him. We're trying to create a museum in downtown Austin right at the bridge, and I'm trying to help with that. But I felt like just by telling this story, like a positive story about bats, could be my contribution. But one cool thing you can do is build a bat box in your backyard. It's real easy to do. You can get instructions online, and bats will come and roost in your backyard. We did that at my house. It's so cool.
Yeah, they like those tiny little spaces.
They do. Yeah, you basically just make two boards that are just about the same crack as under the bridge, and then they can fit in there.
Okay, and it's time to turn it over to the floor. So questions, and no spoilers again. If you read the book, don't spoil it.
Give it up for this brave lady who's brave enough to get up and ask questions.
And also, we're talking books, so maybe not the movies.
Yeah, we don't need to ask about.
We don't have to ask about the movies.
The movies aren't coming out yet.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the book, or books in general. Yes.
Hi, thank you for speaking with us. My question is, so your earlier books had like massive commercial success. We won't talk about the movies, but those also happen. I'm curious how having the commercial success that a lot of authors like dream of then changes your perspective on like the rest of your career, and if it changed your approach to your work.
Thank you. Well, that's a great question. After my first book was published, literally everything you could ever want to happen when you publish your first book happened to me, one after the other. A bestseller in hardcover, bestseller in paperback, sold the movie rights, and then after it being in development, and I got to write the screenplay, first few drafts of the screenplay of the book for Warner Brothers. And then it somehow found its way to the greatest director of all time, and somebody who's played a huge role in the cinema of my childhood. So it was just like a dream experience. It felt like Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. I assumed I was going to wake up at some point and realize it was all a dream. But and then as it was winding down, I just resigned myself to the idea that it's all downhill from here, because what could ever top that? I just assumed I got to go on this wild ride, and then it'll just be something to look back on. It was not anything I ever anticipated. So, but I think in one way, it freed me up to kind of write whatever I want. This is an example of that. I knew it wasn't what people were expecting from me or necessarily wanting, but it's a story that I kind of felt pregnant with all these years. Always, if it felt like I needed to tell it, so I went ahead and told it without really too much regard for how well it sold or if it became a movie or any of that. It was just kind of liberating to write something without all that pressure. So thank you for that question.
Okay.
So I liked Ready Player One, and I was thinking,
Thank you.
Yes.
since most of your other books were like sci-fi, you kind of had a lot of like creative leeway because it's not actually realistic. Was it different having to like actually do a bunch of like research to make sure, because these were events that actually happened?
Yeah, thank you.
question.
That is a great question. It was a little different. You know, I did do a lot of research about virtual reality and haptics and other things for my other books, but this did require a lot more research because it was based on a real event. So, but I will tell you, this is a science fiction novel too. It doesn't look like it, but there's a flying saucer in this story. It's part of the landscape of weirdness in Texas and the Marfa Lights, and we have lots of weird stuff in Texas, not just in Austin. And I wanted to kind of play with that landscape of weirdness. So this is technically a science fiction story too.
And it's a mostly true tale. So if
Mostly
you did,
true, yeah.
If you did read the little subtext here.
I had a much longer subtitle that they made me shorten. It was a mostly true tall tale about the weirdest town in Texas. Too many T's.
Lots of T's. Okay.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So, ever since the Vision Pro came out, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has just been referring to Ready Player One, right? Because they sort of think of the future and they see that, right? Like, what if everyone is just wearing these goggles in the future, right? So, what we write, what we create, movies, books, all of these, they're in a way like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
They give us a vision for the future and we somehow just go towards it. So my question to you is that if you had the chance to write the future, right? Or think about the future, what is it and what's your vision for it?
Oh, wow. If I could write the future, well, I would go for Star Trek. I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, and it's a utopia and humans reaching out into space. Like, that would be the future that I would write, as opposed to Mad Max Fury Road, which seems like the future that we're hurtling towards sometimes. So I was two roads diverged in a yellow wood.
Yeah.
Star Trek, Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
So I vote for Star Trek. Thank you for that question.
Question.
Okay.
What is your most famous story as a kid?
Oh, yeah. What's my most famous story? That would probably be Ready Player One. Is the one that I'm most known for because it got made into a movie. Crazy how many people won't read a book until they find out it's going to get made into a movie.
Read the book. Read the book.
But I mean, part of it is like, you know, that once Hollywood imagines it for you, then you're going to see the actors' faces when you read the story. So if you can read a book before you see the movie, then you get to dress all the sets yourself, and it all happens in your mind's eye. And it's always that's why the book is never as good as the movie, is because nothing is as powerful as the human imagination. So thank you for that question.
And at the mic, yeah.
Hi, I haven't gotten the chance to, I don't know how to read this. I haven't gotten the chance to read this book yet, but I'm very excited to. I'm an environmental educator, so part of my job is getting to teach kids about bats, actually. So I'm very excited to read it. So I was just curious as to, for the writing process, how much of like the target audience for your books goes into the writing process? Like, how is it different to write books aimed at adult audiences versus kid audiences?
Right.
I never think about the audience when I'm writing the book, beyond me. I'm just trying to write to please myself and hope. That's what I did with Ready Player One. That was my first novel. I was just trying to see if I could write a novel. I had tried writing screenplays. I actually had a screenplay get made, and the process was so demoralizing, and it made me question whether or not I wanted to be a screenwriter, and made me try writing fiction, which is a lot more work. Screenplay, there's a lot of empty space on the page in a screenplay. Those things are easy to write. So I try not to think of the audience. I just try to please myself and write a story that I would enjoy, and then just hope, that other people enjoy it too. The fact that other people like my weird little book about Pac-Man and virtual reality and all, yeah. But that was a huge shock to me. Who would ever write that and think that anyone would connect with it. It was not, some master plan. So this I, literally like wrote for my kids and for myself and just for my own satisfaction and hope other people enjoy it. I knew some people in Austin would dig it. So thank you.
And definitely adults, I enjoyed it very, very much.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm an adult.
Oh, I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this earlier at my other talk, is the audiobook is amazing. Will Wheaton does an amazing book on my other audiobooks. He's one of my favorites, an awesome audiobook performer. But for this one, since it's a female protagonist, I got my friend Felicia Day to read it. She is amazing. And Felicia's from Austin too. Felicia is valedictorian of her class at the University of Texas. So she had spent 5 years going to school in Austin, had gone to all these locations in the story, and she knew how to do a Texas accent and say, "What are y'all fixing to do?" And she just does it perfect. And it's my favorite audiobook that has been made of one of my books. So I highly recommend it if you're a fan of audiobooks. She does a
And
great job.
Felicia Day, if you don't know, she's an actress. She plays Charlie on Supernatural series, if you're a fan of Supernatural. I am.
Yeah.
Okay, we got more questions.
Cool. Thank you for coming. Someone like you is someone who has a vision of the future and of the world, and someone who's not afraid to put that vision into life. We live in a world that we sort of lack ideas about how the future should look like, so we just sort of end up doing things that we think will make us money, or we follow prestige, or we follow what other people are doing. But what you have is that you have that bravery, or whatever you want to call it, to follow the vision. So first question is, how can we encourage people to create and sort of follow their vision? Like maybe for you, it's sort of a natural talent that you sort of felt that you needed to do this as a writer. But I feel like everyone has that sort of thing, so how can we encourage people to find that thing in themselves? And the second question, a shorter one, is, writing is a way to sort of show that vision to the world, and then movies become the next step. What would be, what's the future step in that direction to sort of encourage some people to?
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
what would be the ideal medium to?
Great questions. Well, the first question, how to get people to follow their. I always think of Joseph Campbell. I'm a big fan of his, and he had a philosophy that was follow your bliss. Like whatever makes you happy in your life, if it's just building Legos, follow that bliss. Like whatever brings you joy, focus on it. And if writing stories, writing a certain kind of stories, or even writing fan fiction, I'll tell you the first thing that I ever wrote. When I was trying to teach myself to be a screenwriter, was a sequel screenplay for The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. It's this weird little cult movie I was obsessed with when I was younger. I loved it, and at the end, they always promised this sequel that was never going to get made because only 4 people saw that movie. But I desperately wanted to see it, so I wrote it for fun, and ended up putting it on the internet and just put it out there for other Buckaroo Banzai fans. And then I ended up seeing it for sale at comic book conventions. And first time I ever saw something I had written for sale, it was a copy of that screenplay at a comic book store. And I was like, wow, that was just me geeking out on something that I really loved, and I just did it for myself. And that's kind of what led me on to down this path. I always thought I would end up working in computers and technology, and being creative would be something I would do for fun. It has to be. For me, anyhow, I feel like it has to be fun. If you're not having fun while you're writing it, no one's going to have fun reading it. If it's a slog for you to get the chapter out, then maybe you're not, which it can be sometimes. But you always, if you have to kind of be invested in and be enjoying yourself. One of the reasons that there's so many pop culture references in Ready Player One is because it was my first novel, and I was trying to figure out a way to keep myself interested in the story. And I thought, if I make all the puzzles and riddles and clues have to deal with pop culture that James Halliday loves, and his interest can mirror my own, then that makes it more fun for me to write, because I'm always sneaking in things from my own life. So hopefully that's a helpful suggestion.
And we have a few minutes, and I know we've got some more questions.
Oh, sure.
2 minutes. Okay, you're up next.
What made you want to be an author?
Well, I always loved reading. Always had my nose in a book, and I grew up loving Roald Dahl's books. And then I graduated to Stephen King, probably sooner than I should have. Everybody read a Stephen King book, too young, at some point. But and he was his book on writing was a huge inspiration for me. So just wanting to tell stories. I grew up loving stories and revering storytellers. Like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Roald Dahl. So I was always I wanted to give it a try to see if I could tell stories that people would enjoy too. So thank you for that question.
We have 1 minute, and I just want to remind folks that the book signing is at 2:30, I believe.
There's already people lined up, so I'm
So,
going to go
yes.
and start signing right away.
And we have 1 minute, or no, we have a wrap it up sign.
Wrap it up.
Do you have a quick question, sir?
Sure, I'll make
Sure.
it as quick as possible.
Yes.
Thank you for coming and giving us new things to think about. I know nothing about bats. I know nothing about bridges. But when JJ mentioned about bats in Washington,
Yes.
I'm looking at the image of the bridge, and what comes to my mind is Key Bridge.
Oh.
It's the same exact shape. It doesn't have that 1.5 inch space in the central span, but it does have the two lateral. Can you speak to anything about that as a habitat or urban habitats here in Washington?
I don't.
I know, yeah, I know we don't have the populations that Austin has and other places across the country has. A lot of them are very, as I mentioned, very solitary. So, but they do live in caves on the outskirts, like Rock Creek Park and all of that, and they live in trees as well. I would imagine some do live in bats, and I heard there are some that roost up in the Lincoln Memorial sometimes. And at night, during the spring is usually when they're here, they come out from the Lincoln Memorial, which is pretty impressive. But we're wrapping it up. So I want to thank everybody for coming today.
Thank you guys for
and
coming.
remind
Appreciate
you
it.
about the book signing at 2:30.